Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Language Arts Gallery. Today, we're going to continue with day 4 of writing a personal narrative for young learners. And today, we're going to talk about drafting a great introduction. And we're going to focus particularly on engaging our reader with a strong opening sentence. So please remember to subscribe to my channel so you get all the videos for this genre of writing. And you can find this lesson as well as all my other academic writing lessons in my Teachers Pay Teachers store, and that's linked in the video description. So let's go ahead and get started talking about writing a great introduction for our personal narrative. So I always go back and I review what the characteristics of the genre that I'm teaching are, and our students should know that a personal narrative is a true story from their own life. And because it's a true story from their own life, they're going to be telling that story from the first person point of view. So they're going to be using pronouns like I, me, my, we, and our. And our personal narrative, like all good writing, has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And that's our introduction, our body, and our conclusion. Our introduction, which we're going to talk about today, focuses on drawing our reader in. We're going to introduce our topic, and if there's a problem, if we're structuring our essay around a problem and solution, we want to introduce that in the beginning of the essay. In the middle of the essay, we're going to develop the plot, and we talked about how we can use great sequence words to do that. And finally, at the end of the story, we want to share how this experience made us feel. And in our last video, we talked about adding precise language and figurative language to get our audience to understand exactly how we're feeling. So today, let's talk a little bit about our introduction. So our introduction is just how we start our writing. And remember, our students are age 7 to 8, perhaps even up to 9 for this particular lesson. So they're not writing fully developed introductions that we might ask our middle school or high school students to write. So their approach to narrative writing is going to be quite simple. I really want my students to practice engaging the reader with that first sentence, teaching them the hook. And if they're writing about a problem, like feeling nervous on the first day of school, we want to introduce that right away so our reader knows exactly what it is we're talking about. We also want to introduce the characters or the setting if we're sharing that in our narrative. So when we look at our mentor text here, it begins by saying, when I started a new school last Monday, I had butterflies in my stomach. And there's that idiom that we talked about in our last lesson to describe how the narrator is feeling very nervous. But we can see the topic of our narrative, which is starting a new school. And the author does a great job of introducing that right away. But you know what? That first sentence, when I started a new school last Monday, I had butterflies in my stomach. I need something a little bit more engaging. Okay, you started a new school, but I wanna start in the action. I want something that brings me right in and says, oh, I can't wait to keep reading and find out what's going to happen. And that is how we hook our reader, how we get their attention. So we're going to look at some different strategies for how we can hook our reader. The first is a strong statement. I've never been as nervous as I was last Monday. So that's, I think, better than saying, when I started a new school last Monday, I have butterflies in my stomach. So we could start with this strong statement and then go back and we can use that expression, that idiom, to describe that person having butterflies in their stomach. We can describe the setting. Remember, our students need to understand that setting is where the story takes place, but also when the story takes place. That can be the first day of school, but it can also be the time of day. It might be the morning time. So here the author says, I waited outside my house on a cold and lonely street corner. That's a great description of the setting. I really visualize this student standing out there. Maybe it's still dark, they're cold. It's a lonely street corner. I picture that they're probably the only student who's out at this time. So that really draws me in. I want to know, what are they waiting for? What are they doing out on this cold and lonely street corner? So that's a great way to draw our reader in. Sounds and smells. Not only do students love this, but this is a lot of fun to teach. Thump, 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 my heart was pounding. I might pair an ELA lesson on onomatopoeia with this particular writing workshop lesson. So if I was doing my centers in the morning, I might do a lesson on onomatopoeia in the morning, and I'd include that in my centers. And then I would teach this strategy in my writing workshop in the afternoon. And asking a question. My students, I love when my students do this. I do find that some students rely on this strategy a little too much. So I always try and remind my students that this is a skill, it's a tool on their belt, but it's not the only tool on their belt. But having said that, it's a really effective strategy for drawing the reader in. Have you ever been so nervous that you felt sick? That's a great hook. I want to know what happens next. And dialogue. This is a little bit more difficult for students, but again, it's a great strategy to teach if you want to pair this with teaching quotations. If you're going to teach quotations and quotation marks and punctuation in your centers, this is a great strategy to teach in your writing workshop. So all of these things, they serve to make our reader interested in what we're writing about. We want our reader to be curious. So I encourage my students to experiment, try all these different strategies. As your students are writing these over the year, say, hey, I notice you start every introduction with a question. Let's go back, let's try a different strategy. So I think we do get comfortable using one or two strategies, but we want to build out our students' ability to use a variety of strategies to engage the reader. So this resource also comes with a graphic organizer to help our students write a great introduction. We've got our hook, our topic, and if we're writing about a problem, they've got that there. And we also see our mentor text with that engaging first sentence. All right, so thank you so much for joining me. Please remember to subscribe to my channel so you get my next video where we're going to talk about day 5 of writing a personal narrative, and we're going to talk about peer editing.